Some people are thinkers. Other people are doers. I'm a doer. I like to know what my job is going to be when I arrive somewhere. I like to make people happy by preparing a good meal or making sure that the house looks presentable. From a very young age, my father would encourage me every time he saw that I had cleaned the house or that I had helped my mother serve a meal. And his good opinion meant so much to me. I kept that work ethic until I grew up, and now that's what I do. I guess you could say I have a gift of service. Well, by now you know I'm Martha, sister of Lazarus and Mary. And I'm sure you've heard about that one particular day when our Lord spoke rather harshly to me. But I don't want that to be the only reason you remember me. And I'd like to tell you a little bit more about that day, and maybe even what led up to that day. I have a reputation as one of the best hostesses in Bethany, and I'm not boasting. People have told me that. And it was confirmed for me when people started asking me to help with their dinners and their events. And I always tried to have everything ready whenever my Lord would come calling. And let me tell you a little bit more about Jesus. He was the Son of God, that we knew. But we knew him from years before when he helped in his father's carpentry shop. And we knew even then he was destined for something more than carpentry. But after his baptism and after he started his ministry, we knew John the Baptist had been right all along. This was the Son of God, the Messiah. Now, after he started his ministry, Jesus didn't really have a home to go to. And so he came to use our home as kind of a retreat when he needed to rest or just to get away from everything for a while. And I made sure that when I knew he was coming, I'd have all of his favorite foods. I'd have a comfortable place ready for him to lay, and I'd make sure that the house was spotless. Well, on that day in question, he showed up early with his disciples. I was frantic. I was rushing around, making sure everything was getting done, going to the market, cleaning the house, preparing the meal. It was nerve-wracking. I needed maybe 2 or 3 more of me to get ready, because I not only had to feed Jesus, I had to feed all of his disciples, and they could eat. I asked my sister for help, and she ignored me. And when I asked her again, she ignored me again. And I found her in the room with the men, kneeling at Jesus' feet. And on her face was a look of complete serenity. She was listening. She was learning. I asked her again, and then I asked Jesus to tell her to come and help me. And he looked at me and he said, Martha, you worry about so many things. One thing is needful. Mary has chosen the good portion, and it will not be taken away from her. Well, I was hurt at first, and I thought about it. I thought about what he said, and then it dawned on me that he was not talking against me as much as he was saying it is okay for women to learn about God. In fact, it is necessary for all of us to learn the words of our Lord. He was not speaking against my gift of service as much as he was saying that we all had gifts of our own, and we were all special, each in our own way. And that story is not the only one I want to tell you. Another time with Jesus, my family found him like a brother to us. We loved him so much. Now, he was out traveling far away with his ministry, and my brother Lazarus took ill. And it was very frightening because no matter what we do, nothing seemed to help. And after a while, we didn't know what to do anymore. And I remember thinking, oh, Jesus, if only you were here, you could help us. But he wasn't there. So I asked a friend of the family to go to Jesus and tell him. But by the time he arrived, Lazarus had passed. In fact, we buried him 4 days earlier. He had been in the tomb for 4 days. And when I heard of Jesus' arrival, I ran to him and I said, Lord, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. And he looked at me and he said, your brother will rise. And I said, yes, Lord, I know. In the resurrection on the last day, we will all rise. And he looked at me and he said, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, yet he dies, so shall he live. And whoever believes and believes in me shall never die. Now, I knew the Sadducees didn't believe this, but I did. I believed. And then he asked where Mary was. And I went to get her. And he looked at us walking together, and he could see how swollen our eyes were, and how red, and how much we had been crying. And his whole face changed, and he began to weep too, because he loved Lazarus like a brother. And he insisted that the stone be rolled away from the tomb. Now, back then, we did not know what you all know of embalming. And in 4 days, under the scorching sun, we knew that if that stone was removed, there would be a horrible odor. But Jesus insisted. We all looked at each other, and then some men rolled the stone. And Jesus collapsed to his knees, and he prayed. He prayed a prayer that was more like thanking God for something he had already done instead of something he was asking for. And then he stood up, and in a thundering voice, he spoke into the tomb, and he said, Lazarus, come out. And we waited. And we looked at each other, and we looked in the tomb, and there he was. There he was, my brother Lazarus, standing at the door to the tomb, and he was alive. He was alive. And Jesus said, unwrap him, let him go. He was still in his burial bindings, so Mary and I ran, and we ripped those bindings off as fast as we could. Oh, there was so much joy. That was the happiest day of my life. Oh, we had him back. Lazarus was back. Jesus had done this for us. But not everyone saw the miracle of that day. Soon we heard talk that the leaders were frightened by what Jesus had done, and they started to talk against him. They started to talk of putting him to death. We went to Jerusalem as soon as we could, and we saw him carrying his cross through the street. He was beaten beyond recognition. And then, that horrible scene at Calvary. I wished I had died before so I didn't have to see that. My whole world ended that day, the day that Jesus died. We were so sorrowful, and there was no joy among us. That is, until Sunday. And we heard people speaking about seeing Jesus alive, and the first time I heard that, I knew it was true. I knew he had risen, because I had stood before another empty tomb, and I knew this man was the Son of God. So if you remember me for my faith. And don't just take my word for it. Claim him for yourself.